Okay. Welcome. Tonight is the agenda setting session for our voting meeting that'll be May 1st. If anybody wants to follow us, we have agendas out in the hallway. We also have them online, and there's 2 updated agendas for item 18 and 19, in case you've already gotten your agenda at another earlier than today. If you will turn off the sound on any of your electronic devices so as we're not distracted by that, that would be greatly appreciated. So we'll start off with citizen input on the consent agenda, and when it's your time to speak, you'll come up to the podium, and if you'll state your name and address for the clerk to take notes on that, and you'll have 3 minutes, and the lights will start, and you'll have the yellow light will be on when you have 30 seconds left for your time to speak to us. And so the consent agenda is items 1 through 11. Is there anyone who wants to speak on the consent agenda? Okay. We'll move behind the rail.
I'd like to take number 9 off the consent agenda.
Okay. Is anybody else? Sharon? 4. Commissioner Dickerson, sorry. Anybody else need to move anything off the consent agenda? Okay. So do we have questions on item number 1, which is updates to the Transit Department substance abuse policy? I think it's to update it for recent federal changes.
That's right. That's exactly right. This happens from time to time when the federal government updates their policies. We need to remain in compliance, and I think you've been asked to do this on several occasions in the past decade or so.
Anybody need any clarification on that? Commissioner Harrod?
Thank you, Mr. Manager. I would like to get, before we have our next meeting, a copy of our drug testing policy, please, and exactly who's subject to it.
Okay? For the in general government.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Okay. Moving on to item number 2. This is the FY18 Bridge Maintenance Project, the bid award. Does anybody have any questions or need any clarification on that?
Are we going to go through all the consent agenda items?
Thank you for reminding me. We get to jump on down, don't we?
Yes.
Okay, all right, because everybody was okay with it. Thank you. Appreciate that. So now we'll go down to the numeric order. We'll start with number 4 that was moved down there. Here we go. Sale of the permanent utility easement at 284 North Avenue for the transmission line construction. Commissioner Dickerson?
Yeah, I'm just wanted to let everybody know that I plan to introduce a commission-defined option that money go into the special revenue fund that we've established for affordable housing. I'll be asking for that at the voting meeting.
Okay.
Then that would have to stay off the consent agenda, wouldn't it?
Okay, so we'll keep that down there, down
Just
in
making sure.
old business, is that correct?
Just trying to make sure the parliamentary procedure, that's all.
Yeah, since we're off to a rocky start, we'll all pay attention to that. Okay, so is everybody clear on that topic? Okay, now we'll go down to 9, Commissioner Link.
Yeah,
Georgia Juvenile Incentive Grant.
yes, this is to give the go-ahead for
Justice.
a $150,000 grant for a juvenile justice program. And I looked into the program that apparently we use is called Thinking for a Change. I'm wondering how long we've been using that program, how much evidence there is regarding the outcomes. Have there been any other programs considered? I'm just wondering if it's the best program, and is it mandated that we use that particular program?
Okay. This is something that the juvenile court oversees and runs, and of course they work at the direction of the Superior Court, so we can certainly ask those questions and find
Okay,
out.
yeah,
for
I
you.
mean, I did a quick little search online, and the only thing I could really find, the only research paper I could find on it was 15 years old, and I'm wondering if there isn't anything. I mean, kids' lives have changed quite a lot in the past 15 years. I'm wondering what else is out there.
Well, I did say that in the agenda item, it did talk about, the purpose of the grant was to place juveniles in out-of-home facilities as opposed to in institution. And the statistic they shared was during FY16, 80% of the youth in the program successfully completed the program out of the juvenile detention center. But we can find some other measures too.
I'm curious about recidivism rates, if they've been tracked for recidivism or, future outcomes once they move on to adulthood.
Okay? We can certainly find that out.
Thank you.
I think I jumped over old business. Should I go back to that at this point? Or was that supposed to be on hold?
That's on hold. The
Okay.
red light camera program, we
okay.
need another month to continue to gather data for that.
Okay, all right, so I jumped over it on purpose, okay. So now we're in new business, and I meant to ask for citizens' input at this point, especially since we have another citizen here. I wanted to make sure, if you wanted to come to the podium and speak for 3 minutes on items 13 through 19, we're in the new business section, and if you do, you'll come to the podium and introduce yourself and give us your name, address with your name, and you'll have 3 minutes, and a yellow light will start when your last 30 seconds happen. Does anybody want to speak on that? And
I don't know the agenda items, but the Memorial Park Master Plan and/or Athens Community Theater.
this would be a perfect time for you to come up and speak to item number 15, which is a Memorial Park Master Plan and Athens Creative Theater.
Hello, I'm Ralph Stevens. What else do I need to tell you?
An address.
Oh, 1050 South Lumpkin Street, number 203, Athens 30605.
Thank you.
I've been president of the Friends of Athens Creative Theater, which, if you're not familiar, is the nonprofit that raises money to help Athens Creative Theater whenever they have a budget shortfall. We've provided extra money for costumes. We did have a grand design to get them a lighting upgrade till we found out it would cost $10,000. We only raised maybe $1,500, $2,000 a year by selling concessions during the shows. We started selling T-shirts. We do fanograms, which are like congratulatory ads, but instead of buying them for the program, you can fill it out on the spot, send it backstage, and the kids especially like to get it. So anyway, we raise money in that way. So we have an interest in the master plan. We understand that Athens Creative Theater is being moved out, which actually, considering the alternative, since you can't expand Quinn Hall, and they have inadequate storage space. They don't have a scene shop. Somebody wants to build scenery, they have to go out in the rain and bring it back in the rain. So a larger space that would accommodate more audience, they wouldn't have to share bathrooms. I'm all in favor of moving. So if Memorial Park includes moving out of Quinn Hall, making it into a rental space, and giving Athens Creative Theater an upgraded space with dedicated parking, dedicated restrooms, dedicated auditorium, that's going to be everything we could want. So I'm all in favor of that. And I think the Kelly Diversified spot is good, since I haven't heard any other spots.
Thank you. Okay, anybody else from the audience want to speak? Okay, we'll come behind the rail and go down the list in order. 13, Athens Creative Development Campus.
I have a quick.
Commissioner Link.
Yeah. This is for the abandonment of Strong Street, that little block of Strong Street in front of Hotel Indigo, which is currently a public right-of-way, and it's open to auto traffic. And I understand in the plans for this campus, they are going to maintain pedestrian access through that new campus. But I don't see that is shown in this agreement. Is there any way we can somehow come up with an agreement before this abandonment that definitely guarantees that there will be that pedestrian permeability through that campus, a public permeability?
This is initiating the process for abandonment. If the deal does not go through, then we do not recommend that you consummate this. And it is set up to, for the final approval to come upon approval of the master agreement. And so that can be taken care of through there.
Okay, so we'll approve that agreement before this becomes finalized?
Yes,
Okay.
hopefully concurrently, yes.
Okay.
Okay.
We're just going to get all the preliminary stuff done out of the way so that it can, but we will hold off until the agreement's ready.
Okay, thank you.
Shall we put this on consent?
I'm good with that.
Okay. All right, there's one. Okay, number 14, the Firefly Trail Project, project number 6. Anybody have any questions or need clarification on that? Oh, and then Commissioner Hare, did you want to speak to that since you're on? chair that committee?
Yes, I did. Excellent. Thank you very much. I don't really have anything to say. I think it's exciting that we're moving forward on this. I did have a communication with Mayor Farrell out in Winterville, and they will be having a meeting, I think, tomorrow, where this will be a topic. But I think everything looks like it will be smooth sailing to have this completed to go through Winterville. I did have one minor question, and I'm trying to get my diagrams to show up. So on page 93 of the PDF, where it shows part of the trail, this is part of the design plan. If you follow the path from the left-hand part of the diagram to the right-hand part of the diagram, about 3/4 of the way across the page, there's a sort of a kink in the trail. I'm assuming that there's a reason for that, and it's not just that somebody's pen got a little bit tired when they were drawing this. And assuming that there's a reason for this, and I'm not exactly sure where that is, but I'm assuming that that's not going to cause any issues for people that might be cycling along there or rollerblading or something.
It shouldn't. The plans, and there's a couple of places along this mile stretch that could happen. Here, I believe there's an existing tree that they're trying to save
Okay.
by going around it.
Okay.
There's also, I understand, a church sign that may also present a similar issue.
Okay.
But that will be discussed with the property owners during negotiations.
Okay, but in terms of people using the trail, if they're, presumably if they're on a bicycle or rollerblading or something, they may be using a little bit faster speed than people that are pedestrians, but I'm assuming that that's been taken into consideration in the design.
That should be a general enough curve. These are usually designed with, national standards, but I'll verify that for you,
Okay.
Commissioner.
Thank you.
Commissioner Dickerson?
Yeah, I was just going to point out, so this trail begins at the Winterville intersection at Moores Grove, Athens, and Cherokee Roads, and it will go down part of Athens Road and then turn onto Main Street and head all the way to the county line. However, I did talk to Dodd and, Mayor Farrell about this, and it could be that it may end just shy of the county line in order to tie into existing sidewalk until Oglethorpe County comes forward. I think that's all sort of going to be handled, as we're progressing through everything, because they didn't want it just to end, the sidewalk just to drop off there. So, but the design, he's very happy with it, and like Commissioner Harrod said, there's a meeting tomorrow night at the depot from 6 to 8 to take public input, so, thank you.
Commissioner Gertz?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I'm looking forward to riding on this. One of the questions we had when we were developing the TSPLOST package was around some of the peripheral costs that might be associated with TSPLOST projects. And an example in this case that I'm curious about our ability to fund would be plantings and foliage, given that particularly in this area, and then kind of as we head back toward town, we're going to have proximity to a lot of people's yards. So are we able to fund plantings out of the TSPLOST package if we're intruding on someone's yard? I don't know if Bill has a
Bill,
sense of that.
I think as part of
Absolutely.
construction, yeah.
That's within the scope of the project, particularly as part of the negotiation they always do with the property owners, putting back shrubs and enhancing it a little bit. That's no problem.
Great.
Within the limits of the construction,
Oh,
not
absolutely.
necessarily
Yeah, right.
off-site.
You
We
gotta-
won't be planting a forest in anybody's yard. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Any more questions? Shall we put this on consent? Please, everybody knows how excited we are about it. Okay. Item number 15, the Memorial Park Master Plan. I do want to follow up with the gentleman, although he just left, that the Creative Theater will not be homeless. So as this progresses, the plan would be that they always have a place, although it might be somewhere else, but they will not be homeless at any point of the process. Is that correct, Manager?
Yes,
Williams?
yes, that's right.
Okay. Anybody have any questions on this? I'd like to put it on consent agenda. Thank you. Item number 16, acceptance of the 2018 to 2022 Transit Development Plan. Does anybody have any questions or need clarification? Commissioner Neesmith?
Andy, did you do this,
Did I do what?
this plan?
No.
No? It's got your name on
Oh, hang on.
it. GOC approved
No.
it, I guess.
No,
that's the
I'm
next
not
one.
there yet. I'm on
the next
16 right now.
Oh,
Then it'll be his turn.
oh, okay. I'm sorry. I went ahead of myself. Madam Mayor Pro Tem, please forgive me.
Is that it, Commissioner
Yes,
Eastman?
ma'am.
Commissioner Link?
Yeah, well, there's currently some public input going on about this plan. I didn't have a chance to get down there today, but they're taking more public input on Thursday, I think from 1 to 4, correct, at the Multimodal Center. So I want to encourage the public, anybody who rides transit or has any interest in transit, to please go down there and check out this plan. I have some concerns about some of the proposed rerouting, and I don't know the specifics, but I do remember that in a work session, there was talk of limiting the route that travels down Vincent Drive, and I have big concerns about that, especially considering pending development on the Newton Bridge Road corridor and the potential to get some of those folks, lots and lots of folks, very dense neighborhoods off of Vincent Drive, mostly low-income neighborhoods. And it's essential that we maintain transit service there to get some of these folks into town for jobs. And we're looking at having a lot more jobs in that close-by area. So I'll be looking really closely at the proposed route changes. And I'm just wondering, this transit development plan, are those specific route changes going to be voted on as separate items down the line? Or is this kind of like setting things in stone?
Yeah, I mean, to respond to your first question about Vincent Drive, there aren't any service level changes that are really called for in this plan. It's really maintaining the existing services. But, I mean, I think ultimately, you know, this is just setting what is possible with the transit development plan. And so these are things that we've identified with the data that we have and so forth. So as we become, so this doesn't set things in stone per se to say in 12 months we're going to be doing this route, 18 months we're going to be doing that route. We're saying these are things, these are routes that we think that make sense. These are reroutes that, well, we believe based on the input we receive will better service the public. And as, you know, conditions mature and funds are available, we'll be coming back to the mayor and commission and talking about what those might really look like in terms of implementation on the ground at that point in time.
Anybody else? Commissioner
Robert
Gertz?
covered everything that
Okay.
I was interested in.
Right. And then, as I understand it, is since the public information session or public input session is after this meeting, that the agenda item for our voting meeting will have any relevant updates to it. Is that correct? If, as far as the input session, that the agenda report will reflect what's happening on Thursday when we have the May 1st agenda, if there's,
That's right. We'll amend
it'll be
that.
updated.
I will say this, Commissioner, there are, virtually everything in here is as Robert said, it's just, you know, they're not even really programmed financially. It's just, here's some thoughts about what might work. There are 7 route realignments that will happen in May if you approve this, and we can give you more information about that. But one of which is the, and we talked about this with UGA, you know, they're closing I think it's the Gillis Bridge, perhaps, for the back of the Sanford Stadium. And we are no longer internally routing our buses through the middle of campus, but going on the outside. That's an example of one that will change. And there's others too, and we can give you some more information on those. So,
I'd like to see a list of specific changes to routes that are already planned.
Okay, anybody else need, Commissioner Eastman?
Yeah, I have a question, Mr. Manager. I'm looking at the map, I'm looking at the legend, and I see the dotted or blocked blue line for the Atlanta Highway Caterpillar Flex Route. But there's also a blue line of the same color, but it's not blocked. It goes along Atlanta Highway. Can you tell me what that is? Do you see it there? Goes above Atlanta Highway?
this is on page 9 of the.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Maybe the flex route for Caterpillar?
Well, it's not the same as what's on the legend for that. It's solid blue. goes out down, it goes out, well,
My legend matches all the way out there with the, sort of the blue cross hatched, or as the flex route.
right, but what about below it? There's a blue route, but it's not hatched,
Back closer to town.
south of it.
It just goes out by the hospital.
Yeah. It goes out by St. Mary's.
So it's going south from Caterpillar?
No, it is south of that hatched line on the west side of town.
I'd have to look at it with you, Commissioner.
Okay, we'll talk later.
Yeah, well, maybe make sure you guys are clear on what that is. We'll leave that off the consent agenda so that that can be clarified. Maybe if another color needs to come in, that makes it clear. Is that okay with you, Commissioner Eastman?
Absolutely.
Anybody else? Okay. That gets us to Commissioner Harrod again for the Government Operations Committee. Would you like to update us on the bus stop improvements?
So this is a recommendation coming from the Government Operations Committee. We met on several occasions to talk about our bus stops and particularly ways to improve our bus stop program, especially in light of a substantial grant that our staff diligently secured for us. And so to cut a long story short, because it's quite a dense document, two things I think are pertinent. One is that if this is adopted, we believe that we will have much better coverage of bus stop shelters across the county. And the second is that it will, some of these bus stops we are anticipating will be art bus stops, shelters, given, I guess, a couple of things. One, just that they're very popular. People seem to like them, showing some visual interest in different parts of the community, but also we were looking at them as a way of improving the aesthetics on some of our commercial corridors. So that's basically it.
Sounds very good. Does anybody have any additional questions or need clarification? Commissioner Neesmith.
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. You're right, this is a dense document, and I have, maybe you can help me struggle with the following. Number one, does this mean that the bus stops that don't have shelters now, they're just signs in the road with a little concrete pad about 2 by 2, are going to have shelters?
I'm not sure, not necessarily.
Not necessarily. So does the fact that we're going to build art bus shelters take away from the budget so that we have bus shelters at every stop?
I do not.
Because actually, people like the art bus shelters, but the people who are catching the buses want a shelter.
Yeah, well,
I do not believe so, but the manager
I
could
think-
perhaps.
Sure.
yeah, the management can give some of the details of the frequency. Isn't some of it determined by frequency of use or number of people per stop?
Yes.
Something like that?
Yeah, so those are the level 1 shelters where you've got 10 or less boardings per day, and that was sort of a, Justin worked with GOC, but that was sort of the guideline, the common denominator for deciding the level of investment for a shelter was the number of boardings per day. And so there have been almost 70 locations completed to date, but as a result of this moving forward, no new locations or additional level 1s are planned. With level 2, there are 41 new locations proposed, and that's got some additional, that's got seating for 2 people in addition to the sign. And does that involve upgrading some of the, a couple of the level 1 shelters or something? That's right. Yeah.
Insurance, civil license, all the shelters, bus stop, and those that aren't ADA compliant, ensure that those are ADA compliant as well.
So the level 2s will have seats and shelter?
No, they'll have seat and a sign.
And light.
But some of the level 2s and a light, but some of the level 2s will upgrade the level 1s. So some of our existing sites will upgrade some.
You mean they'll upgrade to level?
A seat and a light. and
Some of the
88.
level 1s will upgrade to level 2?
Yes, sorry. And
'Cause the
some level 2s will upgrade to level 3s and so on and so forth.
The cutoffs are different. The minimum cutoffs for a level 1 and a level 2 are less under the new policy than
Yes.
they were under the old one.
Yes, I see that. Well, to me, this is all about customer service, and if you have a bus stop that has 1 or less boarding a day or 5 or fewer boardings a day, the problem might be that the bus stop isn't appropriate for that location and people aren't using it. I mean, this is about customer service. Beautification is important, but serving the customer is far more important than beautification. We need to do the essential thing, which is to provide a sheltered bus stop to all of our patrons. That's, somebody's standing out in the rain and they having to stand out in the rain just because they're the only one that uses that bus stop. That ain't right. The bus stop is there. It needs to serve them as well as it does anybody who's standing out in front of a bus stop that serves 5 or more a day. I got a real problem with that, especially when we talk stretching our budget out, because we're going to spend $38,000, I think that's the number, for each art bus stop. I can't go along with that. I want to see a plan to provide sheltered bus stops at every location.
Commissioner Hamby, then Commissioner Gertz, and then Link.
Well, I think some of the things to think about within this plan would be that we did lower the threshold so that there will be more amenities at more bus stops available for people. And it's a difficult thing to do. I mean, if you've got a limited budget, which we do, and you've got a lot of bus stops, which we do, you gotta make sure the priorities are there to make sure that if a bus stop if you got 20 people at a bus stop, should that be treated differently than you've got 1 person at a bus stop? And if we had enough money to cover everything, then the answer would be no. But since we don't have a whole lot of money, you do have to prioritize in that sort of way. I do think, though, that the unique art shelter sites are a good amenity. I think they're a draw to people riding the bus perhaps more and more interest in it. And I don't know that they would take away from what we're trying to provide for all the bus stops.
Okay. Commissioner Gertz?
Sure. I wanted to introduce just another component of what Butch McDuffie has shared with us about their challenges in transit, which is to get a full-size covered shelter, we require an easement or fee simple ownership of the land. And so there's something of a challenge in just getting into the pipeline to do that. And so they've shared that the transit department is actively trying to seek those locations and negotiate with property owners to do that. And so they very much, I think, would like to put more of those full-size shelters in place, but there's some private property and also some topographic limitations in many places. What they've talked about doing is replacing some of the existing shelters that are sort of the prefab kind of factory-built ones with some of the art shelters, storing those, and then when those other locations do become available, transferring those to those new spots. So I guess, what I want to do with my comments is just demonstrate that I think Transit's doing quite a bit to make sure they can get some new locations, but sometimes those locations just don't pop up out of thin air. They're challenging to acquire.
Commissioner Link?
From what I understand, the funding for this program is coming from SPLOST 2011 as well as federal grant money. And SPLOST 2011, a SPLOST project automatically has your 1% of that project cost goes towards public art. So a portion of those SPLOST funds automatically go towards enhanced shelters, art shelters. I'm curious about the federal grant. I presume that in the application for the federal grant, the art aspect was part of the application, so we're beholden to actually, incorporate art, correct? Is that part of the?
I think we have flexibility within the grant to do a number of things. We did indicate that was something that we wanted to do, but, as far as grant compliance, art it can be subjective. So, we did give them a clear signal, though, that that's what we wanted to do.
Well, I want to commend Butch McDuffie because they came up with a plan that is very flexible when it comes to the art component and also lowers the cost of the art. Some of these bus stops will be your full-fledged, completely fabricated, giant sculptural original art pieces, but they're also buying some prefabricated shelters that will include panels that are simply designed by local artists, much like the panels on the Washington Street parking deck. And those are a much lower cost. The artists get a design fee, and the cost of the shelter just includes that additional design fee, not a full-on cost of an artist fabricating a piece. And it also opens up this program for more local artists. I had a lot of concerns about some of our public art projects tend to be too big for a vast number of our local artists. And in this way, we have artists who, basically might have just, basic two-dimensional art skills who can become part of this public art project.
And often some of the requests for proposals for art, you have to prove that you're already a pretty established professional artist,
Yeah.
and that could give an opportunity for
Yeah.
people who are beginning, and that can help
Yeah,
as
you
well.
need a serious record of skills in order to pull off one of those bigger full-on art stops.
Commissioner Easement?
Okay, first of all, Commissioner Hamby, with all due respect, I don't think someone who's catching the bus cares whether it's art or not. I think they care if it is near where they're coming from and provides them with shelter.
I didn't insinuate that, Commissioner.
Very good. The other thing is that these art shelters cost 50% more than a regular shelter. They're $25,000 versus $38,000, and they're proposing 15 of the art shelters. That's $195,000. That would build 8 just the difference in the cost would build 8 new regular shelters. So we're giving up 8 shelters so that we can have shelters, 15 shelters that include art. We could have those 15 shelters plus those 8 shelters for the same amount of money. You guys, maybe if you live in town, you don't see this, but I know Sharon and Andy and Mike and I do on Lexington Road and Atlanta Highway. There's most of the bus stops are just pads on the ground with a sign. We're adding lighting. I mean, big deal. You give people out there when it's 100 degrees, they're standing there in the sun. When it's raining, they're standing there in the rain waiting for a bus. I mean, how does that promote? How does that support transit? It doesn't. It discourages people from using it. We need to be encouraging riders, not discouraging them and them saying, they don't care about me. And that's what we're doing. That's the message we're sending to a lot of people in the suburbs. Thank you.
Commissioner Hamby?
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Neesmith, and I would disagree with that, and I'm sorry you missed the Government Operations Committee meeting where we discussed this in great detail, and what you would have heard at the meeting was that the major corridors will take the top priority as far as some of these new shelters go. So that's one of the things we were looking at and making sure of, specifically the Atlanta Highway, Lexington Road, and Prince Avenue from Daughtery Street. And Commissioner Link is exactly right. I mean, what we're trying to do is stretch the minimal amount of dollars that we have into making sure that our bus stops are attractive. And what I mean by people the point of making a sustainable bus service is to make sure that we have more riders. And if people are attracted to, some people may not be attracted to the bus stops. I'm not suggesting that, but if it draws interest, like our advertising on the buses will draw interest. We got to do things we need to do in order to draw interest to the buses, and an attractive bus stop would do that. But again, with the limited funds, if you've got one person that's waiting on a bus stop, a lot of our bus stops are close together too. If you go down Atlanta Highway, you notice we have a lot of bus stops. So with our limited funds, we've got to do the best we can to make sure that we're hitting the most people that we can. That just makes economic sense to do that. So I imagine this is going to stay off the consent agenda.
Yeah, and I was hoping that maybe we could get a chart that helps everybody. So if there's a charting that could be letting us know what the current standard is for the level 1, the change standard, which sounds like they're making it to where there'll be more
That's
for the
in
defined.
there.
Is it in there?
It's in
Okay,
here.
give me the page number on that so I can jump.
156.
Okay. So that is there.
156, 156.
Because I think that as we get inquiries about it, then we can go to that page for clarity. And make sure. And then I thought there was something with the grant that says the stops need to be within a quarter of a mile distance from each other, or I had that in my notes from before. So I don't know if there's a distance part of the considerations, but
I think they have
that
to be
seems
at
like
least a quarter.
that might be less of it.
At least a quarter
Okay.
mile.
Okay, so hold on, Commissioner Harrod, I don't think has spoke on
Well,
this.
I just want to make one more point.
Oh, yeah,
if I
okay,
could,
go
and
ahead,
I'll
sorry, I
stop.
might have cut you off.
But the thing to keep in mind, one of the most important things to keep in mind is what Commissioner Neesmith said, or not Commissioner Neesmith, Commissioner Gertz said. Our staff does look for ways that they can put a shelter bus stop, and they gave us one example, and I can't remember where exactly it was, but they didn't own the property to it, and no one wanted to sell them the property to put the bus stop there. But the thing to keep in mind is if you look on, I don't know what page it is, but it's under recommendation number 2, number 3, level 1, our current bus stop threshold for that is 10 or less boardings a day, which level 1 is, of course, just a sign. But we've taken that threshold down to 1 or less boardings a day. That's the takeaway from this.
Yeah,
And what that does is it shoves a lot more bus stops into level 2 and to level 3 and to level 4. Each of these thresholds go up. So that's the thing to keep in mind. That's why I keep saying the 1.
right,
So I hope that makes sense.
okay. Commissioner Harrod started, so it's your turn again, and
Well, I mean, I don't want to, flog a dead horse here, but I mean, I think there are several things that are important to bear in mind. As Commissioner Gertz mentioned, there are some places in town, and we looked at staff identified several locations for us with photographs where it's simply impossible to put a bus stop because the private property owner won't sell an easement to us, and we're not going to condemn half of somebody's front yard to stick a big bus stop in it. That's just not going to happen. So I think it's also important, as Commissioner Hamby indicated, to recognize that by substantially reducing the criteria for when you move from a level 1 to a level 2 and et cetera, many more bus stops across the community are going to have a higher level of service. And so I do think it's also important that, especially with the ARP bus shelters, they are going to be concentrated on the commercial corridors. And, I think that fits in with the efforts that we've been making over the last few years on some of our commercial corridors to improve the aesthetics, in the hope that a little bit of public investment along those corridors will stimulate some private investment. And of course, that's good for employment, it's good for the tax base, it's good for just the visual experience and creating a sense of place as you move through some of the corridors that we have coming from the outside of our community into the heart of our community. So, if money were no object, I would love to see big bus stops at every single bus stop across the county, but we have to be realistic here, and I think this is a good plan that will get us a long way towards where we want to be.
okay, thank you. Commissioner Neesmith, are you still?
Thank
have
you,
a-
yes. So will the money that we have for these grants build all of these level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 shelters that we have in the second column of that chart? Is that enough money to make all those improvements to all those shelters?
Yes, we've got and if you're referring to the chart on, I'm sorry, I'm scrolling there. On
Page 2 and 3 of 5.
And I'm looking at 159. There's under number 7, recommendation 5.
I'm looking at recommendation 2, number 3.
Well, if you will go down to recommendation 5, there's somewhat of a type of budget, if you will, that shows the improvements and the cost and what's actually being paid for.
Did you say 5?
Yes, sir.
No, recommendation 5, okay.
It's page 5 of 5.
Yeah, I see it.
Or 159 in the PDF.
So those counts, are those the same counts that are in the list of the bus stops?
I believe
Is that
that's
2?
correct, yes.
Well, that's excellent. So so they've budgeted the bus stop improvements to fit the budget. They've planned the bus stop improvement so that it fits the grant budget. All right. Thank you, that's excellent. So there was nothing in here about, in the report, Commissioner Harrod, about the corridors being a priority. And in fact, that would fly in the face of what really is the priority. Well, is that the priority, or is it the levels that are the priority? I mean, what's the priority? We don't have a graphic of where these bus stops are going to be improved. That's a fundamental problem.
Well, if you look at recommendation 3B, it does say, the second paragraph, staff recommends that as a starting point, 3 corridors be approved for this approach. Lexington Road from the Loop to Whit Davis, Atlanta Highway from Epps Bridge to the last stop past the mall, and Prince Avenue from Dougherty Street to the Loop. So those, my
Well,
understanding
okay.
is that
You guys
those-
keep shooting me down, and I love
I
it.
tried to tell, I said it earlier, you weren't listening. That's okay.
We're just good at being mean.
Yeah, you are. The other thing is that, I think the Arts Council raised money for the last set of art shelters, and now we're not going to ask them to do that?
I think, the manager could probably answer this better than me. I mean, I think if they wanted to, that would be great, but we're on a bit of a timeline to spend this money because it's a federal grant, if I'm correct.
They are contributing, and also we're going to coordinate with the Cultural Affairs Commission as well. So
Okay.
it may be slightly different than last time, but the same parties are involved.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Commissioner Dickerson.
I was just going to ask him if there's a map, it's one thing to say we've got 147 bus stops that are going to have some improvement, but which ones? I think we've got 20 on Lexington Road from the Walmart in. I think there's 20, 9 or 10 on each side or something, not include Walmart. Just kind of curious which of those are going to be affected. Do we have a map that shows which ones?
That was my point.
Yeah, because obviously not all of them. I know one in particular that isn't because they won't give the easement, so. Just for a visual, so we know, we can let the public know.
Like a map of the level 1
Well,
ones and then the level 2s.
Because I think there's
separate
only
maps.
2 covered ones out on Lexington Road right now.
Are they plottable at this point, gentlemen, as far as mapping?
We'll check with Transit. If we don't have one, we'll make one.
Yeah, that would
Okay.
be excellent. We would get some public support on this, and
Yeah.
people's expectations can be reasonable.
Well, because it's clear it's confusing, and we want to make sure everybody is getting the right information, as well as for us to explain it, and the increases, if we can see that this map that just has a sign right now is about to have a new amenity to it. I think the solar lights are really an asset. I know that in my neighborhood, it's dark where some of them are, and then when they're standing there, and they can, use it as needed and not be shining when not needed. Commissioner
I was
Dickerson?
just going to say, it'll help us too, because those corridors, we have money in TSPLOST for those corridors, and it may be, if we're shy 4 or 5 bus stops after this is done, that we may want to use some of our money that way, so it'd be good to know
Right.
which ones are not.
Commissioner Gertz? Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's good.
Okay. Commissioner Gertz?
Just wanted to sing another verse in a sweet song for Commissioner Neesmith to try and buoy his spirits. And having looked at the state budget,
Don't sing.
the governor has committed $100 million to transit funding in the FY19 budget. And in the same way that in the past, I think our transit department has been able to tap into state funds for capital projects. I anticipate they'll probably do the same coming up. So I'm glad to report that it probably will not be the last transit funding agenda report that we have in front of us, even in the next year.
Thank you.
Commissioner Bailey?
Thank you. I just wanted to say that as one of the founders of the Athens Area Arts Council, we reacted pretty quickly when the need was there for the funds for the art bus shelters. So I'm glad y'all are working with the group, and I think that they should be able to be pretty responsive. They were in the past. I think at the time when I was a member, they were very happy to help. And they came up with some money pretty quick. That's all.
Okay, all right. Moving on to item 18, we have printout at everyone's seat for the terminology change for 18. I believe that's the main change that's with the updated agreement for the Envision Athens agreement. Anybody want to speak to that? I mean, I know Commissioner Dickerson does, so we'll start with Commissioner Dickerson, and then anyone else who needs clarification, go ahead.
Okay. Well, just to remind everybody, so about 3 years ago, we started talking about a community-wide public-private plan. And as of December of last year, we had created, with the help of a 38-member steering committee, thousands of citizens and thousands of points of input, a 103 action plan, action agenda in 14 different areas of our community, education, social services, economic development, and so on. And where we're at now is implementing it. And some of the past projects and plans we've had have failed because there hasn't been good project management and communication. And so where we're at right now is we're transitioning into implementation. We recently, in the end of March, we hired a project manager, an independent consultant, who will act as the facilitator to get the parties to the table when there's an action item that needs to be worked on. And we have 14 priority actions, one in each one of those areas, that will be developed into a work plan probably next month. The Oversight Committee will meet, and we will start working on developing that work plan. And that will be our map to move forward, and that project manager, Aaron Barger, will be the one who will make sure that those meetings are occurring and keeping people informed, letting the public know how to get involved in those discussions and whatnot. So this is a memorandum of agreement that basically commits our $75,000 in the upcoming budget. We'd already approved $75,000 during this fiscal year. And once it is signed, we will officially execute the agreement with the other partners and hire Ms. Barger to begin work on May 2nd.
Gotcha. And the front page of the agenda lists the 12 contributors as well on that, and I can see why you would need someone to coordinate getting everybody together. Commissioner Lake?
Yeah, so this is a $322,000 budget for a 2-year effort, and the unified government is taking on just under half of this expense, and I think there are about a dozen partners here. I'm just wondering what the discussion entailed that had the county taking on the lion's share of these expenses. And, we have the University of Georgia, we have both the hospitals, we have Georgia Power. I'm just curious about that disparity, especially considering, these are mostly nonprofits who aren't actually paying taxes or property taxes towards this tax money that is going towards this effort.
Well, if you'll remember last year in the budget, we did not know, we knew something was going to happen. We weren't through with the plan. And so we put in, I think, $100,000, and it got whittled back to $75,000. So that, we heard a lot early on in this that, this is just another plan, nothing ever happens with our plans. And so y'all budgeted those funds so that we could move that forward, and we offered that to the group for the effort. I think you could, when you look through the action agenda, in fact, just of the next things that are supposed to happen in the next 20 years, as I look through, there's already 24 things we're working on right now. So we have a vested stake in this plan. For what we're leveraging with the collaboration with our partners, for an unprecedented effort to implement change for this community, it's a relatively low cost in the big scheme of things.
Commissioner Hamby?
Okay, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. And I'd like to add to that also that as you look through the 103, mind you, 103 items that are to be recommended, that was based on a lot of citizen input, the majority of those 103 items are stuff that the government is going to be responsible for. So our lion's share of what this community has asked us to do is coming from the government. But to emphasize the point of other people at the table who are helping pay for this is a good thing. And I think as we will go along and move through these 103 items, that Ms. Barger will help us with and keep us on track with, that you'll see, I mean, certainly the school board is participating at the table, and they'll have a big play in it, but what'll end up happening is, if they've got an action item that requires their budget, they're gonna use their money on it, and at the end of the day, it's a all hands on deck sort of effort to help us meet these 103 recommendations. And it's not, I wouldn't look at it as some sort of equitable type scenario, because at the end of the day, it may not be that. The education part will have a lot to do with it. The University of Georgia certainly is going to be a big partner in all of this, and there's expenses that are going to come up during this whole process that we will be mindful of. But hope that helps explain a little bit of it. So initially, when we're looking at it, initially we needed to get the ball rolling, and initially when you look at the 103 items, a lot of the expenses come from the government side, but that doesn't take away from the importance of having the people at the table to help us achieve these items.
Yeah, well, it's a pretty big team. We're all on the same team with this. It's a great
well,
effort
it's,
and great project moving forward with the commitments, dollar as well as other commitments. Wait a minute, I lost my notes. Who was next? Oh, Sharon.
I was just going
Commissioner
to
Dickerson,
reiterate
sorry.
as well. The unified government it basically has a stake in every single one of those actions, sort of what Mike was saying, whereas the school district may not, the hospital may not. They have specific actions that they're going to be really focused on, but it's important for the government to be at the table when all those discussions are happening, and we will be. So I think that's justification for why we have a larger share. I'll also point out that the Clarke County School District, although it's not reflected here, has committed up to another $13,000 in addition, and the Housing Authority another $6,000. With the other partners, I think probably ready and willing to add on if necessary. So again, we tried to look at the level of effort or the level of financing based on how they fit into the puzzle, and that's how that was decided. So. But I think this is something that we're embarking on that hasn't ever really been done before in several ways. Obviously, we've gotten a good group of people at the table. We have our institutional partners and the 3 additional citizens that we've added demographically reflect and geographically reflect our community. We made an effort to do that. I'm more than happy to share that detail if anybody's interested. And so the intent is to make sure that everybody is at the table and everybody has a voice, and not the people that typically, the normal people that are there. And those, just keep in mind, the oversight committee, which is what we're calling this 23-member committee, is there to help guide, not to make decisions, and the project manager is not there to do the work, but to facilitate the work and make sure that people are meeting and that we are holding them accountable to those actions that are going to be carried forward. And to be there to make sure that if we're talking about economic development, something comes up about the schools or social services, that there's a connection there, and that then brings those groups together to talk about whatever that matter might be. So it's being in the room, being aware of what needs to happen as far as the synergies and whatnot, and so I think that's going to make a big difference. And then the communication piece that has been maybe not one of our fortes in the past. We're going to make sure that the public is made aware of everything that's happening and how they can get involved at any point. We already actually have a database of citizens who said that they want to be involved in the volunteer effort, and that information will be, shared. The project manager will have that, and we'll make sure those individuals are aware when those meetings are happening. So,
Excellent. Anybody else? We want to leave this off consent for more discussion, or shall we
I'd like to place it on consent.
give it a nod of approval by putting it on consent? Does that sound good? Okay. Now, item number 19, of which we've got the updated agenda report at our station, and it is also online for those that are watching. It's the Fire Station number 2 and Cooperative Extension Service Center, both are SPLOST 2011. This is a construction contract award. Does anybody need more clarification on this? Okay, hold on over here first. Commissioner Gertz.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I appreciate it. I had a few questions about the budget. I mean, obviously, we see that it's going to be a more expensive project than originally anticipated, but I wanted to kind of dive in a layer deeper on a couple of the elements. Could staff produce for us what our total earned interest is on the 2011 SPLOST package, as well as unspent dollars from completed projects, So I wanted to know kind of the full universe of dollars that we're hanging out there, particularly as we go into the last handful of projects that are part of this 2011 SPLOST package.
Yes.
The other thing that, that I'm interested in, and I'm looking at facts and issues number 13 that has kind of these budget elements, is what operating cost reduction we might see, particularly because of these enhanced lead standards and the solar component. So, I mean, if we're going to spend a little bit more money, I guess my hope would be that we're going to be saving some money
Long-term.
in operating costs over the long run, and I just want to see if that's demonstrated or not.
And how long a time that would take to recoup that money?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. So if the,
Sorry.
you know, so are we spending $700,000 in lead funds and going to save $100,000 a year, or less or more? So interested in that. And then I'm also interested in the question of, and I didn't see this in here on first glance, and so I apologize if it is in here, but revenue from sale of the West Broad Cooperative Extension Facility, what the anticipated dollars are from that.
All right, the amount. And Commissioner Link, if you'll give me a minute. Commissioner E. Smith, this is in your district, isn't it? And I meant to call upon you first, if you will let me
Madam Mayor
go,
Pro Tem,
allow you
that's
now.
quite all right.
Would you like to go now, and then I will go to Commissioner Link?
No, actually, I wouldn't. I'd like to hear some more discussion.
Okay, Commissioner Link.
I am going to be voting no on this project because I still object to the location of the Cooperative Extension Office at the far edges of the county. You know, but from what I've been able to find out is the majority of users of this office tend to live on the east side. As someone who went through the Master Gardener program, the majority of folks going through that program were in neighborhoods like Green Acres and Cedar Creek. We've got a lot of folks who utilize this facility for SNAP Ed programs, and a lot of them live in some of our public housing communities and lower income multifamily complexes on the east side. Most of our agricultural facilities are on the east side. Our Cedar Shoals 4-H'ers are on the east side. I'm going to continue to object to this. I know it's a done deal at this point, but, you know, as someone who uses the cooperative extension and someone who's been following this project and was excited about this project, it's essentially an agricultural community center with, you know, classrooms, event space, a commercial kitchen. It really has the potential to be a thriving community center, and I feel like it should be placed in an area of the community that really needs that, where we have that need for some youth development programming that could exist out of that facility. I know this is beating a dead horse at this point, but I just had to get that off my chest.
Two horses. So this won't go on the consent agenda. Commissioner Neesmith and Bailey. Okay, Commissioner Dickerson.
Are you going to let me go first?
No, Commissioner Bailey, because Commissioner Neesmith is listening now. So, and then we'll go to Commissioner Dickerson.
I'd like to.
Commissioner Bailey.
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. I was opposed to this site, too. I utilize the services of the cooperative extension, but we made the decision. This group voted to put it there, and I think that we need to support the decision this body made as a whole and support our staff's efforts and go forward. I will still not like where we're putting it, but I will support what we voted on as a group. Thank you.
Okay, understood. Commissioner Dickerson.
So I'm not looking to beat a third dead horse, but, you know, I want to remind everybody, back in October at our retreat, we talked about a larger government complex idea. We didn't talk about necessarily, well, we did talk about some locations, but we talked about a large government complex idea, maybe for an upcoming SPLOST potentially. And I just kind of wonder if this wouldn't be a good time for us to consider, with space allocation studies still going on, and with a potential pending SPLOST 2019, that we not put this on hold. I don't know if there's any huge hurry. We've got a fire department already in place, and the cooperative extension is managing for maybe 3 or 4 months to give staff time to finish looking at the space allocation study and maybe even to look and see if there's some potential opportunities out there for a government complex, you know, a location and/or maybe even existing buildings, I'm not sure, that might actually envelop the cooperative extension in that too. So, I mean, I'm not terribly happy it's not on the east side for some of the same reasons everybody else said. I think, you know, we needed to make a decision. We made the best decision with the information we had, but things have changed, and it may be something that we need to consider given our conversation at our retreat.
It's interesting because I was thinking of this as a mini example of us grouping two of our entities together as an example of how to save money on a construction site and group them together. So I was thinking that this was a good example of a mini version of that, because the fire stations do need to be placed strategically. But understood. Commissioner Harrod.
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. So I too, when we talked about this originally, this was not my preferred location. I would, given our subsequent conversations about some kind of a government complex that might be funded through SPLOST 2019, 2020, whenever we anticipate asking the voters to approve that, in the context of our space needs downtown, especially for the judges who are bursting at the seams. And I know we had talked about creating some more space. I do think that there would be some wisdom in perhaps thinking about cooperative extension going into some such building, especially given that the cost of this has increased so substantially since it was first being planned. Obviously, we need to go ahead and build the fire station. That's a given. But I would be amenable to thinking about putting the cooperative extension in some anticipated future government complex that we've talked about. And I would say if you've gone down the wrong road, it's never too late to turn around. And I would think about the example of the Classic Center that way back 25, 30 years ago, whenever it was they were first discussing it, there was some discussion about not having it downtown, and they got very far down that road, and then at a certain point they said just not having it downtown is not the right location. So I would urge us to think about obviously doing the fire station, that's important, but perhaps holding off on the cooperative extension part of this, thinking about it as part of a broader government complex that could be funded by SPLOST 2019, 2020, whenever, for the reasons really that Commissioner Link had mentioned. I always thought that Lexington Road was a better site for this.
We're turning the dead horse around.
I know, we've got about 5
That horse is alive.
It's alive and kicking.
Commissioner Hamby, and then I think it's Commissioner Bell.
Yeah, I guess I'm trying to figure out what to say here, because this was my preferred site, and, you know, from that standpoint, and it still remains that, because there's still some questions, but there are still some questions that need to be answered. I'm not too keen on the price that has gone up with this particular project. One of the selling points that we were making when this happened was that we'll save some money if we build them together, and I'm not seeing that at this point in time. I'm not quite ready to separate the two at this point in time, because I think, you know, what we heard last time, if we did separate the two, the cost would be even more for the fire station, for cooperative extension. So I think we need to figure all of that out before we do anything of that standpoint. But all that to say is, you know, we brought up at the retreat looking at a larger government complex to help us eliminate some of the silozation that goes on in government, and to provide a facility that would be better service, provide better service to people to access. Provide, you know, right now we're spending we've got several SPLOST projects out there to try to energy make some of our older buildings more energy efficient. And what could happen on a new SPLOST project, that you could save that money for one, and build a new building that would be already energy efficient from the get-go. So I am curious, and I don't mind holding this to see if we can get some answers about the logistics of a larger government building and how a cooperative extension could fit into that. It makes it hard to argue for a larger government complex if we're starting with this process, and I don't mind taking a step back to see what that would look like. But and if it doesn't look right, or if we don't save money on this end, and then I remain committed to making sure. I mean, some questions need to be answered before I'm actually going to change my mind on this, because I still see some benefit in this. But what is pulling me and what's making me think twice about it, of course, is that larger government complex and how this could fit into play with that. I'm not making much sense at all, but
Well, there's been a lot brought up with that, and I think that if we learn a little bit more of the time sensitivity, and we were already seeing the increased prices from when this was
Well, that's
predicted,
I mean, that's,
and making sure that we are giving cooperative extension, fitting in what the committee, what brought that on to SPLOST 11.
well, and that's why I was pushing for us to borrow the money for TSPLOST, because we, obviously we heard
Yeah.
we see the costs rising on these things, and to get moving quickly on some of these things, but we've already passed that point.
Right.
From that standpoint.
So we're getting a lot of questions out there, and are we feeling, hold on, I wanted to make sure, I was trying to, he said he wasn't making sense, and then I've got Diane, Commissioner Bell, and then I've got you as well.
Are you through?
Are you?
I think
I
may come back though, but I mean.
Okay, it's my turn.
Yes, because it's Commissioner Bell's turn.
It's my turn. Thank you. I know when I first came into the commissioner, that was one of the things we started working on, and Commissioner Sims was a part of the journey that I joined hands with, trying to address this, I thought for the right reasons, and because of the connections that I've had with many people with cooperative extension and the agriculture and horticulture school, that was a main thing they wanted to see happen, was for the right reasons, for it to be in a location that was going to be advantageous for the staff as well as the students that would be having access to this facility. And I remember us pushing as many buttons as we could. You were a part of it. Several of us met for coffee, trying to see where we could push to get the right answers for the location. And of course, being in my district, the South Lumpkin was a part of that. I'm still getting people saying to me, why is that going out there on Cleveland Road? So that brings us back around. We made a judgment, we made a decision, but there's nothing wrong with trying to review it and see what the right reasons can be and where the locations can be. And if it can be a part of this project that we're referring to, that would be awesome if it could be. But to find the location that would be more appropriate for the people that are going to be facilitating, the ease of getting the kids there, the ease of picking the kids up, and whatever, that was one of the first things that came about the Cleveland Road. That's a very, very high traffic, contentious at the time of day when you're going to be picking up some elementary and middle school kids. So I would also go, I've something about that horse that was mentioned. I'm a part of that horse, I think.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Sorry, Commissioner Easement, you said you wanted to do listening and there's a lot of talking. I thought you wanted to just keep, I was waiting for everybody to be finished. I thought you wanted to be the grand finale. Commissioner Neesmith.
Commissioner Hamby's going to forget what he wants to say if you don't ask him to say it.
Thank you, Commissioner Easmith. And I was going to say, if this provides us an opportunity to examine a larger facility, a larger government facility, then I'm asking us to think, and I think Sharon is too, and several of us are, to think bigger than just the cooperative extension. This project can open the door for us to think larger than that. This project has gone over budget. That's a concern. We just can't. That's just something we ought to raise questions on and take a little pause about. If there is another option out there, especially if we're thinking bigger and a larger complex. I mean, imagine what we could do if we have a larger complex that satisfies all of our government options. And if you can take and just envision here around the City Hall campus, for example, Now, we've got the Costa building that's going to be worked on here soon enough, but if we could free up the water department building, or we'll put Bill in the basement somewhere in the new building, sorry, Bill, or that nice building that Bill has over there. I mean, if you can free those up for some sort of public-private partnership or some sort of public-private creative partnership, we could really do some good with look at what we could do with Satula, over in Satula. We always hear about planning department needing more space and more meeting room, and we don't have, the setup to allow for the microphones in there for people to be able to hear what's going on. So there's some advantages for us to looking at something that's bigger than just the cooperative extension. We need to get the cooperative extension done, but the question is, could it be done in conjunction with a larger facility and be part of a larger facility that helps us? We always talk about the siloization and the communication of government, and I think this opens the door to help us do that. And I'm willing to listen for a few months, not too long now, mind you, but I'm willing to listen for a few months to see where it could go, and if it could go anywhere. I hope it can, because I can see some good positives from it.
Okay, Commissioner Neesmith.
Thank you. First of all, the cooperative extension is a totally different animal in our government operations. Our involvement is we own the property. The cooperative extension is staffed and paid for by the University of Georgia. So having them co-located with government operations, I don't see the advantage at all. Second of all, we've bought the land. If we don't build the cooperative extension on that land, then we have wasted money on a fire station land. We've bought the land. Third of all, we've been talking about this. I was on the Citizens Advisory Committee. Both of these projects had great support. That happened in 2010. It's now 2008, and you're talking about delaying it until a SPLOST in 2019. So that means we might build it by 2025, 26, 8, 9, 10 years from now. That's not right. The governments, we've been on TSPLOST, we said if we're going to do these things, let's do them quick. Well, we had done this one quick, and now we're talking about delaying it another 4, 5, 6, 8, I don't know, years. We've got signs up. We're saying we're going to build this. They're out there on Cleveland Road. And by the way, Cleveland Road is not busy. It's not busy. It's just not.
I'm talking about getting there.
Well, okay. It's not easy to get to Lexington Road either. And by the way, most of the people I know are on the west side, and they want it there. So, you can do the numbers if you want, but the fact is this is a very popular project on the west side. So if we delay it, it will cost more. We're not saving money. We're delaying it. It'll cost money. And as far as I'm concerned, it provides no benefit when it comes to the government complex. By the way, the government complex might be on the west side. So think about that. So let's just get this project done like we said we would 8 years ago. Thank you.
Okay, I believe in line with my notes would be Commissioner Harrod and then Commissioner Link.
I was just going to add one. I mean, I think people have pretty much made up their mind what they want to do. So the only thing I was going to say is I think part of the reason why the Cleveland Road location was recommended with co-locating cooperative extension with the fire station originally, if I recall correctly, was within the budget, we could afford the land there, and there wasn't enough money in the budget to look at other locations. But since we're now talking about adding money to the budget anyway, I'm not sure that we would have come to the same locational conclusion if we knew then the size of the budget that we're talking about now. And so I still think it's, I hear we've bought the land. I think that, this, what might be the quote-unquote surplus land next to the fire station, that could be perhaps, it could be sold, it could be used for a community, build a community center or something on there. I don't know. But I think at the end of the day, as I said, I was never enthusiastic about that location, and I think we need to choose the location that works for the purposes of what cooperative extension is supposed to be doing, especially if we're talking about adding a lot more to the budget now than we knew we had earlier on anyway.
And just as a reminder, I'm
I
sorry,
was
go
just
ahead,
gonna-
Manager
The
Williams.
initial reasoning, which still holds true, is that it's shared grading costs, shared stormwater costs, shared parking facility. So the savings are there. We just didn't know what the bids are going to be until we, and tried to explain the escalation of all that.
But if, just for the sake of argument, let's say Cooperative Extension doesn't go next to the fire station, all of that grading and everything could be done, and some other community center or something else like that could be built there. We've still saved.
Not really.
We spend it.
Well, you'll replicate those costs on another piece of property. Yeah.
But if they're part of a bigger complex, we would have to do that anyway.
No, that's true. Yeah, with another tenant.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Commissioner Link.
I
And
am
then-
happy to know that this horse is up and trotting. I would ask management to come up with some estimates on, if we remove the Cooperative Extension Office from the site and possibly still improve the site and then subdivide it and put it on the market, what might we get for it? I think that's something we should consider. And also, I just want to point out that I feel like this is just another example of the shortcomings of our SPLOST user group process, where we have user groups that are majority made up of staff. And I've talked personally with Cooperative Extension staff, 4-H folks who use that facility, and I would urge y'all to as well, and talk to the folks who actually use the Cooperative Extension facility and hear how they feel about that location at the far edge of the west side of town. And, especially 4-H kids from Cedar Shoals who would have to drive, during rush hour on the loop. There are deaths, multiple deaths every year during rush hour on the loop. So I really think that this is just another example of how we need to improve our SPLOST user group program and really assure that those committees have actual users involved.
Manager Williams.
Just to clarify, the site selection committee is the one that made that went through that very long process on the site selection, not so much the user group. And that's where that decision came from.
So the user group was they were never consulted about these sites. They were just consulted about the facility itself.
I'd have to go back. It's a very long, elaborate process, but even if they were consulted, the site selection committee is the one that made the decision.
Yeah,
Well,
I
ultimately, the
recall
mayor and
that.
commission made the decision. So just want to clarify that. Secondly, we could quantify, we could try to give you, we could at least give you the appraisal of what it appraised at just a few years ago. But what we won't be able to quantify, much like with this bid, is how much more it would cost to put it somewhere else. So assuredly, because we don't have the efficiencies on another site, that will definitely go up. And then you add to that potentially, depending on what the economy does, some escalation of construction on another property. So just as you ask us to try to quantify things, there's some things that we won't be able to. And there will be risk involved.
Well, I would ask that we all, reach out to some Cooperative Extension employees and then 4-H folks and talk to them about their feelings about where it should be located and what would benefit the services they offer the most and essentially benefit our entire community the most by having, as many people as possible able to access this really important facility.
Okay, I think it's Commissioner Hamby.
Thank you. And
has
I
something
won't
to
take up
add.
much more time because I think we'll have more time to discuss this, obviously. But again, the larger discussion is what we ought to be focusing on, the larger discussion 20 to 30 years from now. This opens the door for something, I believe, that could help us address that. And when a motion is made at the next meeting or at our next voting session meeting, it's about making a motion that looks at, that directs staff to look at that bigger picture. And where, how much, I know we've got this study coming and talks about space needs. How much space are we going to need over the next 20 to 30 years? Let's take that step first and see where that goes, and include in those space needs this cooperative extension building. This money could be used to help build such a space that could be used by everybody. And I would argue that we do maintain the cooperative extension building as where it is now. We will be maintaining the cooperative extension building if it's built at this proposed location. And I think it's a good thing that if there are university personnel working in this building, that's a good thing to lessen the siloization that we see that happens across governments, across different users within this community. So I'm hoping that as we come to our voting session, if this is going to be put on hold, that it needs to be put on hold within the context of not looking for a new location for just the cooperative extension, but it needs to be looked at in the context of a larger government complex. And I think we'll be well served as a community, and I think we'll be well served as a commission to look at that, because if we're talking about what the LEADS program can save us over time for this just one small specific building, let's look at what a bigger building will do. Let's look at what enabling the public-private partnerships from these existing buildings that I mentioned earlier could provide for the county and for the county budget. That's all I'll say for tonight, I think. So, this is wearing me out.
Me too.
Well, with that logic, then we don't need to put the Economic Development Department across the street. We need to hold that and put them in the new government complex. With that logic, we make decisions, you move on. The cooperative extension facility right now is woefully inadequate, woefully. They have a hard time running their 4-H programs. They don't have enough meeting space. They don't have enough office space. Putting this off is not a service to our citizens who use the Cooperative Extension Center, because they're not being served well because there's not enough room. So, let's move on. I think putting this off, we're going to be wasting money because we bought land we can't use. No one's talked about building a center, a community center on the west side. No one's asked for one. We were going to get the meeting space we needed out of the firehouse, so we don't need it. So that's a canard. That's a red herring. As far as I'm concerned, a lot of this is a red herring. The Cooperative Extension Center has nothing to do with government operations. Blaine, do you meet with the Cooperative Extension Center?
Yes, they're one of our routine updates that we have.
Routine update, okay. Do you have staff involved with what they do?
I think we pay for one of the staff there, and the rest of them are paid for
by UGA.
University of Georgia.
Right, okay. So
they don't take direction from us.
Right, they don't take direction from us. So let's don't talk about these kinds of things because they don't fit. It's at the Cooperative Extension Center. It's a unique animal. We don't need it in a government center. We need it, though.
Okay. Well, I will try to capture this conversation and share it with the mayor.
So is this going on consent then?
No, we lost consent on the first comment, I believe. We lost consent. And I believe that even for the site committee, if our site committee chair was here, he could review that with us. We had a couple rounds with this and delays in the site committee selection on the agenda. I think that was also one that came back around. Okay, so that wraps up item 19. So now we will receive the staff report on recommendations from the Planning Commission. Brad, whenever you're ready.
Good job. You got it. Spice this one.
Come up just a little bit. Okay, we have one item for you this evening from the Planning Commission. It's a request to rezone, combine and rezone two pieces of property from an RS8 RM Limited overlay to an RM1 planned development. This is out on Cedar Shoals Drive. Currently 2 duplexes, 1 on each lot. They want to build 2 additional structures, each of which would be a triplex, 6 total units, all of them 3-bedroom units. So it would increase the density from the 19 to 38 proposed, 18 existing to 39 proposed on the parking. And then I'll show you the driveway information in a little bit. As with any PD, if approved, this becomes a binding plan and report. A couple waivers with this PD, one to allow the 2 new structures that are to be built to face away from the street, as the existing buildings do not face the street either, and then also to allow an increased amount of parking over what typically would be allowed. See the site here. Existing zoning is an RS8 with the RM limited overlay, which more than likely means this was probably an RG classification under the previous ordinance in the 90s, which would have allowed the development of a duplex on each lot, which is what's there. So we're dealing with structures that probably go back about 20 years in terms of their construction period, and the request is to combine and put both properties into an RM1 classification with a PD, which is similar to the zoning just to the south along Highland Park Drive, as well as at the corner of Whit Davis and Cedar Shoals Drive, also an RM1 PD, also done back in the 90s. You see here the existing, that the blue property line in the center is really not where it goes right down the center where you see the way this was built, 2 separate driveways, 2 separate parking pads. They were all 5 bedrooms back when these were built, duplexes on either side. You see just the old site plan when they were built independent of each other. That's existing condition today with separate split driveways, really not a good situation from a traffic standpoint. The proposal as part of being able to build the additional units would alleviate this, put it into one driveway that meets current code, and then provide landscaping and additional parking. That's the existing, one of the 2 existing structures. You see the buildings that really pop out at you on this plan are the 2 3-unit buildings that are proposed to be built with the parking extension. And then you see down, get this to work here, single driveway now instead of the split driveway going in with landscaping as well, an elevation of what's proposed. They are under the RM1 density with the new units as proposed as well. And staff recommendation, Planning Commission recommendation was to approve. There is one condition dealing with the deceleration lane. There may be some engineering issues with getting this lane in. Public Works originally asked us for it, so the condition that we have put in place is simply that if it ultimately is required, in whatever form that may take, given the right-of-way out on Cedar Shoals, that it be required to be put in if required by the Public Works Department. If there is an option that they can work through without putting it in, then this condition would allow that to occur during the construction process, and they would not be held to it as a condition. And that completes the staff report.
Okay, thank you. Interested in hearing what Commissioner Harrod has to say.
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. So this is towards the end of Cedar Shoals Drive. I did actually meet with the property owner, gosh, several months ago now, and when they were first interested in doing this, and encouraged them to look at doing this as a planned development, which I'm glad to see that they decided to go down that route. I don't really have any objections to this, and in fact, I think that some investment on that end of Cedar Shoals Drive might encourage some more investment and upgrading of some of the other housing along that corridor. So I don't see any reason to be opposed to this at present, unless some additional information comes to my attention. I did have a couple of questions. So on this deceleration lane that's being proposed, if either our traffic people or GDOT, although this is a local road, so I'm not quite sure why GDOT would be involved, but anyway. So Brad, if the deceleration lane ends up being required, is there enough space as you're coming down Cedar Shoals Drive, if there's a deceleration lane, to still have the sidewalk operate? Is there enough space physically to fit that in? I think that, because I think it goes down the hill a little bit, doesn't it?
It does, and I don't know that I can specifically answer. You can see from this picture the existing condition where that sidewalk is on the two split driveways in terms of edge of pavement. My thinking is that the addition of the decel lane would more than likely require at least a section of that sidewalk to also be relocated. And I know we're getting into topo the further off the edge of the road with grade changes that we get into. This was a comment that came fairly late in this process, which is why the applicant at the Planning Commission meeting really asked for the ability to continue to have that discussion to ensure that it could be done and not, be, if it ultimately becomes a condition of the ordinance upon approval, then even if he's able to work out another option, the only way to fix it is to come back to this body and have that condition amended, which is the reason we worded it that way. But I don't think they can get one in and not have to move the sidewalk. Yes.
No, I mean, I'm sure they would have to move the sidewalk. My only concern is because you can see as you start to go down the driveway,
it really drops
the deceleration lane would basically, I imagine, have to go to where is currently the outside lane of the present sidewalk, in which case you're then going to have to push that sidewalk probably 8 feet or so further, and it starts to get down the embankment, and I'm not sure that would be so good for people in wheelchairs pushing.
I mean, it may involve building a
strollers.
retaining wall to keep that sidewalk ADA compliant.
Okay.
To get it in.
Okay, but you guys are onto that.
It's being looked at. I know that was, the design was more of the concern from the planners than anything else at this point. Yes.
Okay. And then the only other question I had, and it's really more for my edification, so in their report on page 187 of the PDF, but it's in the petitioner's report, it says Table 1, trip generation projections and trip differential. I just noticed that since 2006, from 2006 to 2016, the number of average annual daily trips has dropped by about 600 and something, which really surprised me, given how much more traffic we seem to have out on the east side. And I was just wondering if you had any idea as to why that was.
I do not, but would be happy to look into it.
Sure.
Get you
I
an
mean, just
answer.
for my
Yeah.
edification, that this, because in most places it seems to be going in the opposite direction, and yet, and I'm wondering if the three laning had something to do with it.
It may very well have. I'll check on it and let you know.
Thank you.
Anyone else have questions, need some clarification while Brad's presenting, or everybody good? Good to go?
I just want to make a
I'm
quick
sorry,
comment.
Commissioner Lee.
I think this is a good example of, an appropriate location where we can do a little upzoning and increase some density to get some additional housing. I mean, this kind of townhome style housing tends to be more affordable than your individual lot, single-family homes. So I think this is a nice little project.
Okay. All right, is that it? I think we're done for the night. Thank you, everybody.